What's up, everyone? It's Q from Retro Q Gaming, and here's a big question we're going to take a look at. So, with Resident Evil 7 being what it is, Resident Evil 7 obviously is a return to the survival horror style Resident Evil versus the last few games and the way the series has progressed over about the last 10 years. You're looking at Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6. I'm really only focusing on the main entries in the series. We all know there's Revelations, Revelations 2, there's whatever that crappy PS4 and PC online shooter is. And you get the idea. So I'm really just focusing on the main core series, the main numbered series of Resident Evil. So Resident Evil 7 has returned, or has come out, I should say, and it's returned back to its survival horror roots, especially, like I said, considering 6. But Resident Evil 7 has been very well received. I've personally played through the entire game. I think it's very good, and it's definitely worth checking out. There are one or two issues, but no game is perfect, short of Secret of Mana. But anyway, besides all that, where does Capcom and Resident Evil 7 go from here? Sorry, let's try that one again. Where does Capcom and Resident Evil, not just Resident Evil 7, go from here? So despite one or two minor issues with the game, as well as some shady DLC practices that Capcom have kind of snuck back. And, they returned Resident Evil 7 to form, they returned their shady DLC practices to form. Anyway, that's a whole different topic for a whole different video. Now, so the main issues I want to ask is, where do Capcom and Resident Evil go from here? I know I've said it like this is my third time saying it now. But either way, so the way I want to look at it is, let's say we're probably going to have 2 more Resident Evil spin-off style games, be it something like Revelations 3 or something completely different within the next, I'd be surprised if we got one next year, but it would not surprise me if we got one in 2019. Now, at the same time, there's something else that I'm going to mention now in a minute, which I'm not taking into consideration. So, the big thing is I think we are going to see another Resident Evil main series entry, probably 2020 at the earliest. That sounds crazy, just to think that a game can be here in the, I'm doing air quotes here, but near future, and be 2020. That's nuts. So that's beside the point anyway. That's just my own little oldness showing. Now, let's stick with the Resident Evil vibe for a second. So what do I expect from Resident Evil 8? I think they're going to stick with the same formula. I think they're going to stick with the first person. I hope they survival horror it up a little bit more without going into like big spoilers or details even on Resident Evil 7. Personally, I finished Resident Evil 7 with a shitload of spare ammo and a shitload of healing items, which, sure, it can be done in Resident Evil, say 1 and 2 and 3, probably even more so or easier in 4 and beyond. And I realized that at the same time, as a highly skilled Resident Evil veteran, I'm not the perfect gauge of all this, and I'm not the I won't say the target consumer, but I'm not the benchmark or the average player, So I do hope they tighten it up a bit as far as the survival horror goes. Maybe drop the ammo a little bit, make it a tiny bit more scarce. Do the same thing with the ammo as well as the health. So that's where I think that's gonna go. I hope they tone down the combat slightly. Now, again, if you haven't played Resident Evil 7, I'm not going to go into massive detail about it, but combat in previous Resident Evil games felt tense. There was a lot of, okay, I have a choice. I need to hard avoid this or fight for my life, or there's a very real possibility I could die. In Resident Evil 7, a lot of it felt a bit more, not all of it, but it did feel that there was significantly more combat that was just in it for almost combat's sake. Now, like I said, I'm not saying combat was bad, I'm not saying the game was bad, I'm not saying any of that stuff, but it just felt like they went a little bit too overboard with it. They maybe they didn't want to dial it down too much, just in case people got bored, or it's like, oh, there's no action, there's no anything in this game. That could be the case. Personally, I think if they dialed it down one or two more notches, it would have been perfect. It would have been just on the right level of survival horror and all as well. As far as location, I'm not really worried about where they go. There's so much to choose from. They could do a city. They've already done the plantation house and surrounding area. They could do a city. They could do a multi-story skyscraper. They could do a ship. They could do whatever they want. So there's no shortage of locations for them to use and just to come up with. What I would like to see though is this is a way I described. My friend has just started playing Resident Evil 7. He's only a few hours into it, and he had one complaint, one main complaint about the area, if you will. He said that they made it out that it was going to be in this one huge mansion, which obviously it's not. And the big thing because of that is, I said to him, was like, well, okay, listen, I'm not going to spoil anything for you. The game does open up a bit, but you're still going to feel pretty compartmentalized. And what I meant by that, and I explained it to him, was that for the most part, each individual, we call it area, is its own self-contained thing. There's little to no reason to go back at a later point, with the exception of maybe one backtracking for story purposes. It's basically it. Like, you'll finish one area, maybe go back for 2 minutes later on, and that's it. And then you're done with that area for good. So, and each individual area is pretty much like that. And I explained that to him, and he was like, okay, well, that's a bit disappointing. And I said to him, yeah, it's not perfect, but it's not ideal, but it's not terrible. So I do hope they now this is going to sound really weird, I hope they expand on the average standard playable game area, but tighten it up a bit. So what I'm going to use as a perfect example is Resident Evil 1. Let's take a look at the mansion of Resident Evil 1. Okay, it was a big area, and there was a lot to do in there. So they expanded on, so it was bigger than the standard mansion or plantation house or whatever you want to call it from Resident Evil 7, and it was still tight enough that you could progress through at a proper pace, and there was a lot to do there. Even later on in the game as well, for Resident Evil 1, as far as the mansion goes, you would leave and then come back, and you'd still have a decent amount to do there. You wouldn't just open 2 doors, clear out 2 rooms, and you're gone. So, I hope they do that kind of thing. I hope whatever setting they choose, I hope they expand on it and then tighten it, keep it tight while it's expanded. I'm not sure where the story would go. I'm not sure, what the actual story would be, when it would take place, or who would follow. I'm going to leave out the spoilers for Resident Evil 7 for that part. So, God knows whatever happens, who's going to follow, when, what, where, why, how. We'll see. There's a couple of years before the game even needs to be thought about. So that's it. I think they're going to still keep the first person style with a lot of the same mechanics. Probably improve on it a little bit more, add a little bit more into it. Probably add a proper hiding mechanic I'd imagine, at least anyway. It would probably be their next on the agenda. So that's what I think we're going to see in Resident Evil 8 from, whenever, maybe 2020 or some shit like that. Now, that brings me to my next point, which I mentioned earlier, that people were probably already going to be commenting about it or thinking about it or screaming at me, whatever. But the main idea is that even though I do think we'll see another Resident Evil spin-off of some sort within the next 2 years, between now and 2018 and 2019, don't forget we're right at the very start of 2017, so there's still plenty of time. And this stuff could have been worked on previously anyway. But the main one that everyone's probably thinking about and everyone's probably asking for is the Resident Evil 2 remake. We all know that Capcom have announced they're doing a proper, full Resident Evil 2 remake. As far as we know, it's going to be in the same style of remake as Resident Evil 1 on the GameCube, and obviously then the HD version of that versus the original version. So it's going to be, from what we know, the same fixed camera point, survival horrors, limited camera view, limited items, limited ammo, all that kind of stuff. From what we know, it's going to be all that. And That's promising, and that's probably going to come out within the next 2 years. I think we'll see that before the end of 2019, even though I don't count that as the spin-off that I think we'll see before the end of 2019 as well. For the simple reason is, one, it's arguably, it already exists. For the simple reason is, it's a remake of Resident Evil 2. Sure, they have to redo basically everything from scratch, and at the same time, they have to redo everything from scratch, and I don't remember what my next point was, but the point is, it's a remake and a redo or reimagine. Oh, and expand upon the story. That's it. But they're gonna remake and reimagine and expand on Resident Evil 2, an existing game. So it's essentially going to be, it's already an existing game, just with a bit more content and remade and whatever you want to call it. So that's why I don't count that. But I cannot wait for Resident Evil 2 remake. I absolutely can't wait for it. Now, that's where I think that's going to go. Another little thing I do want to mention is, I know earlier on in the video I said I'm not going to go into detail about it, so I won't. But I really hope that at least I'll do games individually. Resident Evil 7, the DLC situation has been pretty bad straight away. From day one, as soon as the game launched, it's been pretty bad. The planned content that was actually announced previously before the game's release was expanded upon and detailed and outlined, and release dates and prices and all, for the majority of it at least, was announced. I think it was the day of release or the day after release, and it turns out that they did some shady stuff with some exclusivity that they never mentioned. They did some timed exclusivity, I should say, actually. They've properly detailed the quality and quantity, I should say, of what's the best way to describe it, of the two first major pieces of the DLC, which all sound awful, by the way, and the fact that they're going to be out so close after release. So it basically sounds like that they were finished and they were just cut from the game just to sell, that's the general idea. Okay, so I'm not going to comment on all of that stuff. It's just to give you an idea about what I'm going to talk about. So I really hope we don't see something like that for Resident Evil 8. I hope they properly expand on and properly give some extra DLC. Resident Evil 5 DLC, for example, I thought was pretty good. There was two main versions of it for the story style DLC. There was also the Mercenaries expansion part, but I don't really count that. That was multiplayer deathmatch. No one plays Resident Evil to play multiplayer deathmatch. But Resident Evil 5 had good ones. It had a kind of a throwback style one with Chris and Jill, to old school style almost, and it had a bit more of a more action orientated one, very similar to what the main content of Resident Evil 5 was. So it had a nice variety, and it was in two different parts, so that worked out pretty well. I'd like to see something like that, something more meaty, something more substantial, and something more relevant for Resident Evil 8. One thing I will say as well, when talking about the Resident Evil 7 DLC, they didn't outline the new extra proper story chapter or story mode or campaign or whatever they want to call it. It's just said it's going to be available eventually, but they didn't properly detail it or expand upon it. And as far as the Resident Evil 2 remake goes, I do not want to see any type of DLC or pre-order bonus incentive for that at all. That needs to stay away. Preferably it would stay away from all games. But this is Capcom, let's be real. Resident Evil 8 is going to have DLC. I really, really hope Resident Evil 2 Remake does not have DLC. I don't believe Resident Evil 1 HD Remake had DLC. Resident Evil 0 did. That had, what were they called? Costumes for the characters. Costume packs. I really hope we don't see any DLC, or any paid DLC, I should say. Maybe they can add in extra costume packs later for free or whatever. But I remember back in my day, just like Resident Evil 1, you earned those extra costumes by, finishing the game multiple times, doing it with better ratings, or just being a beast and completing the game in under 2.5 hours, just because you're a maniac. But anyway, that's all beside the point. That's the way I want to see it, and that's the way I hope that goes. Personally, I can't wait for Resident Evil 8, whenever it does happen a couple of years from now. Resident Evil 2 Remake, definitely can't wait for one of the greatest games of all time, easily up there as one of the top 3 survival horror style games. Yes, I said top 3. The other one is not Resident Evil 3, don't worry. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but that's for another video maybe. But anyway, that's the way I see that. So that's where I think Capcom and Resident Evil are going to go. We already know there's another film coming out, 2 new films actually, you could argue. One is coming very, very soon with the live action, supposedly final Resident Evil live action film from Paul Worthless Shit Anderson and his absolutely gorgeous wife, Mila Jovovich. But we'll see how that goes. Personally, I'm going to go see it because it's like a tradition. I have to see them all at this point. And there's another supposedly canon CG film coming out as well. I don't remember the name of it. I'll get around to looking it back up. I wasn't really planning on even mentioning it in this video, but you get the idea. So Capcom obviously have a stake in all of that, and it behooves them to, I won't say quality control it, but, you know, to hype up and pump up stuff, you know, drum up hype and all for their franchise. So that's where I think they're going to go with Capcom and how they're going to look at Resident Evil. Maybe because Resident Evil 7 was announced a while back and the latest Resident Evil film was announced even earlier, maybe they'll take time off and they'll take a break. Maybe they'll reboot the Resident Evil franchise for film. Maybe they'll give it to a different director. Maybe they'll take it in a completely different direction because of Resident Evil 7 and its return to survival horror form versus it's just full on, you know, well, whatever you want to call it, like found footage horror films and just kind of horror films in general are always popular and are always good, usually, hopefully. Looking at you, Blair Witch 2, or Blair Witch 2016, we'll call it, and it's not really fair to call it Blair Witch 2. But anyway, they could do so much with it because of the actual change in the Resident Evil gaming series now. It's moved very much away from what Resident Evil, the film series, is. So they've got many, many options when it comes to that. And, you know, there's plenty of time, plenty of years, plenty of games, plenty of actors, plenty of directors, plenty of platforms, plenty of whatever the fuck you want to put in as your actual noun in there. And it's all very relevant. So we'll see how it goes. Over the next, let's call it 3 years, well, would it be end of 2017 and 2018, 2019? Okay, let's call it 4 years because we're still at the start of January. So over the next 4 years, between now and the 31st of December 2020, I do expect to see 3 Resident Evil games, possibly 2 Resident Evil games, and an actual announcement for another one. Once again, those will be Resident Evil 2 Remake, the random spin-off I'm predicting at some point, and either the actual release or the announcement of Resident Evil 8. So we'll see how it goes. As far as new live action and CG films go, beyond the 2 that we already know are coming out, who knows what's going to go on. But that's basically it. Capcom have finally started showing appropriate love and respect for an extremely critically acclaimed franchise that is beloved by fans and gamers all around the world. And it's so good to see them actually doing that at long last. It's been so many years, but it's really, really nice to see it actually happen. And it gives me hope that they may continue on with that path of giving the series the respect and the treatment it deserves. And it will only go well for them. If they make Resident Evil back to what Resident Evil was known for and what Resident Evil was loved for, it's going to pay off. Resident Evil 7 has pretty much proved that. So that's it. Capcom, please, you'll never see this video, but Capcom, please do Resident Evil justice. Treat it with the love and respect that it deserves, that the fans of the series deserve, and that one of the greatest gaming series of all time, and one of the arguable founding series of the survival horror genre. There's 2 of them, Silent Hill being the other main one I'd consider. Give it time, treat it right, and you will reap the benefits tenfold. It's that simple. Let me know in the comment section below anything you think of that Capcom can do or what they will do, or what they could do, or what they shouldn't do, or whatever, for the future of Capcom in relation to the Resident Evil series. In game form, film form, whatever form, anything. Let me know all that in the comment section below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You can follow me on Twitter, details in the description below. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the rest of the videos in my channel, and I encourage everyone out there to play as many Resident Evil games as possible to enjoy this franchise, except for Resident Evil 6.